One of the most impactful things that Sonlight has had on our family is just in our family culture. I loved talking about anything and everything with my girls. I loved seeing their personalities develop. I loved hearing their deep thoughts on all the things, whether it was current events or relationships or friend trouble or whatever. Because we had always talked about all the things, they wanted to talk with me and hear my opinion. And just this week, I was traveling with my 20-year-old, and she was trying to stay awake to keep me awake while I was driving. And I said, "I'm fine, you can go to sleep." And she said, "No, Mom, I want to stay up and talk to you. I love talking to you." And that is what we took away from our Sonlight education, is that we are a talking family. And when there's a problem, we talk about it. When we're happy, we talk about it. And I just love that, having that relationship now with my grown children. Everyone's an adult, and we talk all the time. So that is my favorite thing about Sonlight.
Over 15 years ago, when I was scouring every possible curriculum to try to find what was best for my children, that's what I had my focus on. I had what was best for my 4 children in mind. And at that time, I really wasn't thinking about what how it was going to impact me personally. But I can say 15 years later that I have learned far more than I ever thought I would learn. Sonlight has consistently been there through all the years on the shelf. All these characters with their resilience, all their persistence and their difficulties, their victories, have helped me. They've helped me as a mom and as a wife and as a woman and as a Christian. And I never imagined that all those years ago. It's been great for my children, that's true, but it's also been amazing for me as well.
We benefited from homeschooling with Sonlight in so many different ways, but 2 things in particular I wanted to share today are when the kids were younger and we would read about characters and their behaviors and the consequences to their behaviors. It affected my kids' behavior because they saw what happened to the character in the story, and then in their own lives they were able to decide not to do something because they knew what the consequence would be. And so it really did help drive their character. And then as they got older, because we read from different points of view, different worldviews, my kids were able to learn how to sift and sort and think critically about events, about people, and things going on in the world, because they learned to do that as we were reading about different events in our Sonlight stuff. So it has served them well now in their adult life, that they don't believe everything that they hear on the news or that they read online.
There is one word that sums up what doing Sonlight over the years has meant to us, and I think that word is relationship. Doing a literature-based curriculum rather than something textbook and workbook-based or online has really made a big impact on my family. And I have seen my role go from being mom/teacher to being mom/mentor, developing relationships along the way with my children that I really don't think we otherwise would have had. And now that they are older, I have seen how the curriculum really has prepared them for whatever they wanted to do in life. So now at this point, I love sharing Sonlight with other families because I want them to experience all the books and developing that relationship that doing so will bring to their family.
Hi, I'm Jonna Lawrence, and you might ask me, why am I passionate about Sonlight? Why do I like to tell people that Sonlight is the best curriculum in my opinion? My opinion, for what it's worth, is the fact that it allowed my husband and I to teach our kids to be internationally minded, globally minded. Our goal was to raise mission-minded kids, and Sonlight walked along beside us and our raising of our kids to teach them to be globally minded. They taught them worldviews. It taught them different nationalities, different cultures, and was able to intertwine mission stories all throughout their education from kindergarten all the way through high school. So we served in many ways. I like to tell people that not everyone is the feet of the world or feet of the church, but some of us need to be the arch supports. A friend of mine, she said that probably about 30 years ago, and it has stuck with me. But I think that God has called me to be an arch support and not necessarily the foot of the church, but I find every way I can to help when I am called to do so. And I raised my kids to also do the same thing, and by using Sonlight, we were able to do that. The second reason, a really big reason for the simplicity of it, is the instructor guide. I am not a planner. I am not an educator by trade, but to have that instructor guide was a lifesaver for me many times over. At our biggest crisis of our family, which is not to some people, we had had a surgery, we had had flooding in the house, we had had septic tank cave in, we had had no power for 3 weeks, we had 2 brand new puppies, and I could keep things together by having the instructor guide. And when I couldn't get it done, I could hand it to my mom and she could pick up and take off and do school with the kids and bring them back while I dealt with crisis. So those are my 2 big reasons: global-minded children, internationally, I guess you would say, or mission-minded, and also the instructor guide.
Why do I think homeschooling with Sonlight is one of the best ways to educate your children? Well, because it's definitely worked for our family. When we first started homeschooling, we had no plans to do it for more than a year or 2 when my oldest was in preschool. But we fell in love with Sonlight's beautiful books and the discussions we were having together, and I was seeing my kids grow so much. Over the years of homeschooling, however, we realized how incredibly free and flexible we were as far as our schedule and our location. And so earlier this year, we decided to hit the road and travel full-time together as a family around the United States. So now we have been doing this for several months, and it has been amazing to experience the places that we're learning about together as a family, while also bringing all those beautiful books along with us. So our education has not stopped, it's just grown even more because now we have new opportunities that we did not have at home. And when I look back and think about if we had put our children in school, we would have missed these opportunities, and the thought probably never would have even occurred to us. So I will be forever grateful that we took that leap with Sonlight all those years ago, and am thrilled with the results in my own children.
One of the ways that Sonlight has benefited my family is that it gave us a way to talk about hard topics together in a really comfortable way. Because we read history and literature all the time, we had the opportunity to talk about the choices that leaders made, the choices that historical people made, the ways that book characters learned from each other, and how things could have gone wrong if people didn't do the brave thing or the right thing in whatever situation they were in. So when life happened to us and we needed to talk about the decisions that we were making, we had a way to do that because we had been having these hard conversations all along.
Using Sonlight as our homeschool curriculum has significantly changed the life of our family. From the beginning, using Sonlight gave me the opportunity to focus on what was most important to me. Reading amazing books to my children, having it planned out. I did not have to spend countless hours pulling resources together and figuring out how they would work together to teach significant periods of history. It was done for me, allowing me to spend the time I needed in discipling my children and in reading to them and just being a mom. So from the beginning, it's had a significant impact. And I don't even have time to talk about the impact that so many books, the characters we met in them, the places we traveled to, all of those have changed my children and their outlook on the world. Even something as simple as learning how to organize their time because of seeing me from the time they were little, checking off boxes in that IG, having a plan. Then as they got older, they new to develop their own plan. So time management, because of the example of Sonlight, has been an amazing gift and has had a significant impact on our family. Homeschooling with Sonlight has been more than school for us. It has been a lifestyle, and we're so grateful.
Hello and welcome to this month's Homeschool Helps and Hacks. I am Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community and social media manager, and I'm also a Sonlight mom of 2 kids who have been educated with Sonlight since preschool. They are now 9 and 14, and I'm excited to be here and talk about all the ways that we think Sonlight is a better way to educate your children. So we're going to start with some introductions. Christy, you're on top, so I'll let you go first. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit more about you?
Yes, I'm Christy. I'm glad to be here today. I have 4 sons, and we've been homeschooling for many years with Sonlight from the beginning for 15 years, I think it is now. And our oldest is 21. He's away in college. Our second is going to school here locally. He's also in college. And then we have 2 high schoolers, a 9th grader and an 11th grader.
Well, thank you for being here. Lisa, welcome. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, I'm Lisa. I am the mom of 3, 2 who were homeschooled with Sonlight. The first one went to public school, and that cured me of that situation. There's a large age gap, so I was able to just kind of start over. We did use Sonlight all the way through. So my oldest daughter is married with a baby who's about to turn 1. And my youngest daughter is a junior in college.
Well, thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and dive right in with the love of learning and avoiding that classroom at home mindset. So I know sometimes when people start out, they assume you have to set up a classroom or homeschool the same way that you would teach in a classroom. But what makes it different at home? And how does that really encourage that love of learning that we talk about, as opposed to maybe traditional classroom methods?
I think the classroom mindset is great if you have 30 children, but it's not necessary when you have 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4. You don't have to have that kind of rigid schedule and everyone needs to be seated because if everyone was up, it would be chaos and all of that. And you really don't even need a blackboard or a whiteboard. That's what I'm showing my age. We had blackboards, but whiteboard, you really don't. It's okay if you have that, but you don't have to have any of those things to homeschool because for our family, at least, we were not trying to recreate school at home because quite honestly, if I was going to recreate school at home, I might as well send them to school and go out and work. That's what I would have done other than homeschooling. So to have the ability to be comfy on the couch or move to the kitchen table if we needed to spread out or go out in the backyard or whatever, go to the park, whatever that might be, was just way more important to us than creating a classroom in our home.
Mm-hmm. And if there are things that you liked, if you have been in public school previously, or if you were in public school and you enjoyed it, there's nothing wrong with including that. If you like celebrating the 100th day of school and dressing up like you're 100 years old, then you could do that. And that could be fun, but you don't have to feel the pressure to do all of those things and to do things just like, my oldest was in public school previously. And when he came home, there were things that we kept. I've said this before, we love kissing our brain because his kindergarten teacher taught us when you think real hard and you've done hard work, then you kiss your brain. And we loved that. So we still kiss our brain. He's 21. We still kiss our brain sometimes. And I think that I learned in probably my senior year of high school, I started loving to learn when I had a break from the public school system. And for one time, I lived on campus at college, a college about an hour from home. And I took 2 classes and I read more than I had ever read in my life. I had been in honors classes where we read, lots of books, or we were supposed to, and we didn't all read them all. And that was just the culture. And it was a completely different culture. And I came back, and my senior year, I read more that year of books that just I chose. And that is how I learn. And I read all through the years. And I think I did learn so much from the books that I was reading outside of the classroom. I don't know if you've had that experience, but it was my experience. So when I found Sonlight, I found that this loving to learn didn't have to involve a desk and a board and all of those things, but some really good books, and seeing how things fit together and thinking about all of those things, that was where the learning came.
Yeah, I agree. I think something about that kind of casual, curled up on the couch reading a book, it doesn't feel formal. Therefore, it feels more fun. And so if you're snuggling up and reading a story, I know several of us have mentioned this, when you start with little kids, they often don't realize they're doing school yet, because everybody thinks of school as like sitting at a desk and taking a test. And when you're just snuggled up reading a story, it doesn't feel like school or hard work at all, but yet they are absorbing so much information. And so many of the Sonlight books are, so engaging and entertaining, in addition to providing good information. So kids are kind of catching all of this information without even realizing it. But yeah, I know that whole, like you mentioned, Christy, when you can learn the things you're into, which homeschooling just allows so much more time for that, because you're not stuck on a schedule of all 30 of you need to be doing this, so that then all 30 of you can do this, so then all 30 of you can do this. It allows you that freedom and flexibility to take the rabbit trails, put on the costumes, make the meal from the country you're learning about, watch a video about that place, or whatever extra things you want to do too, which I think teaches your kids that learning is fun, that it's not, work, or you memorize all these things for a test and forget about it, but it's actually something enjoyable to do together as a family. And I know I've also talked about this, as the kids have gotten older, we weave learning into almost everything, because it just becomes a habit to say, oh, look at this object here. Did you know this about it? Or, we just find that we learn every day, no matter where we're at or what we're doing. So let's talk about those family bonds. I know this is something that when you talk to longtime Sonlighters, they often talk about the meaningful discussions, or how close they are as a family, or, their teenagers still like them, all of those different things. How does teaching and homeschooling the Sonlight way really encourage those stronger family bonds?
Well, I think when you're around someone all the time, you either really, really like them, or you really, really don't. And because we did just always work together, and we always had that atmosphere of, oh, I didn't know that. Let's find out more, or whatever that is. We really are a very close family. And just, I think there's something to be said. I know all families have inside things or whatever, whether it's from a movie or whatnot, but because especially I think because I taught my kids together, and so we read the same books and they were reading the same books, I think that a lot of times we'll be in a situation and it will spark that memory that everyone has. And that is a really cool thing. And I know that you can have a close family when you go to public school. I'm not discounting anyone's experience on that, but I just think it's a little bit different when you're just together all the time, and you're just always learning together. And I think as the mom or the parent, that you're willing to learn along with your children, I think that allows your children to see you in a different way. Like, you are the mom and you are wiser, but I don't know everything, and I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to show you that I don't know how to do this. And I think that just adds a different layer to your experience with your family, because they know you and they love you, warts and all, that kind of thing. So I really think that was one of the key things that kept us going with Sonlight, was just the closeness that it fostered with everyone in our family. Because my husband worked from home a lot of those years, and so he was involved, and that's super fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the conversations that you have around books, not just the quotes that you have, which you definitely have after you've done Sonlight for a number of years, but even the conversations that you have as you're talking, when it brings up something, important to me that I want to communicate to my children, whether we're talking about racial tension, when you're talking about early American history, or whether we're talking about just different things throughout history, things that are controversial, things that aren't, just things that good memories that you have of your family and how your American story, what happened, or your international story, wherever you live, the history of your family, something that comes up that my children know personal things about all of their great grandparents, because as we're reading, we come across something and I will say, oh, your grandmother was born the year before this happened. And you can just start talking, or your great grandmother, I thought my grandmother. And you can just have those conversations around things that are important to you, things that you want to share, things that they want to share, things that they wonder about, and that they just open up sometimes. I have 4 sons, and I love nothing more than those moments where we're in the middle of a book and they maybe in the middle school years, in those years that they haven't been talking as much as they did before. And then we get to a subject in one of our books and they just open up and they start saying what's on their mind and something that's been stressing them out. And we talk through that. And there's a closeness, a definite closeness that comes from that. And I've told my husband just in recent years that I'm getting really excited about things that I hadn't really thought a lot about. We've spent so much time shaping these people that live with us. And it's really exciting to think about the next generation and what happens in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and how you get to reap the benefits of what you have planted in these people who are amazing, that God made and gave all of these gifts. And we've had this time to spend with them through this amazing thing we got to do called homeschool. And then, to see what happens when they come back home after they've been away for a while. I'm preparing for that right now. We are so excited. He's excited. We've counted down the days. He's sending me texts. It's only 2 days, so it's super exciting. And I'm really at this point of looking ahead, and I've been so busy, I haven't thought of it. And now I'm like, wow, this is going to be different in this generation than my last generation, where we were all doing different things, going to public school in different directions and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's exciting.
Yeah. And I think that's so encouraging when I talk to you two and some of the other Sonlight mentors who have grown children, to hear about that relationship with your grown children. Because I think every parent wants to have a good relationship with their grown child. But as it's happening, Christy, like you said, you're busy. You don't know, are you forming those bonds? Are you, planting the seeds for that? And I think when you're homeschooling, you have all that extra time together, which just makes it easier, like what you were saying, Lisa, just in the day-to-day to spend time with your kids. It's something that I love, because I feel better about the fact that if we're tired and crabby for 30 minutes on a day, that's not 30 minutes of the only 2 hours I'm seeing that child all day, right? Like I am also seeing them 12 other hours that day. And so there's chance for that redemption and the apology and, coming back together again. And things like that I often wonder, I'm like, oh, if my kids were off at school and then they had after school activities and jobs, would we only be seeing each other in that kind of frazzled, running around state, as opposed to actually, sitting down and talking together? You guys also mentioned with the books, it becomes very easy to talk about hard subjects. This is something my daughter she's kind of a deep thinker, and she's discovered various authors through Sonlight, and when she'll read other books that aren't even part of her school, she'll come and say, oh, I read in so-and-so's book about this. Did you know this? Or that makes sense in today, whatever's going on politically or whatever, because I read this and now I know this. And so she makes connections on her own. but she still wants to tell me about them. So that's something that I've really enjoyed as she's gotten older, to see that and see what she's into and who she's becoming. Like you guys said, when you see who that child becomes as an older child and then a young adult, to see those paths happening, and then see that she still wants to interact with me. And no, we don't snuggle up on the couch together anymore, but because we laid that foundation, the path is already there and open for us. So let's talk about,
I
go ahead,
think like
Lisa.
what you were saying about the frazzledness and whatnot, I think in a general everyday life, we give our best to others, our job, our school, our whatever. And then we come home and we can finally and we do give that snappy retort or whatever. And I loved what you said about having 12 other good hours. And I think that's a huge part in that we're not giving our best away to others. We're giving our best. Yes, we're giving our worst as well. But, hopefully the good outweighs the bad. And I just, that really resonated with me. I loved that you said that, because I do know that when we were first married and my son was in school and after school care, and we both had full-time jobs and all of that, we really did give our worst to one another, because our tendency is these people they have to love us. So, but I really love, that was part of the shift I wanted in my family, was to give my best to my family.
Yeah,
because they're the ones who deserve it.
Yeah, I definitely remember a day whenever I felt the worst as a mom, whenever I went, dropped my oldest went to public school for a very short time at the beginning. And one morning I dropped him off and I just went to the office and I said, could I have my son back for just a moment? I just need to talk to him for just a moment. And they said, sure. And so they let us stand out in the entryway of the school where there's glass, around. And I stood there and just talked to him and said, we didn't get a good start today. And we were, busy and trying to get, things done. And we just had a sweet talk. And I told him I was sorry for the way that I had talked. And I still remember that moment. And the lady in the office told me, thank you for coming by and doing that, because so many kids in the morning get off to a bad start and the rest of their day is downhill. So I really appreciate as a mom the fact that you came in and did that. But when they're in your house, you don't have to go ask the secretary.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. You get to have access to the kids, right? When I talk to people, especially now with all the security measures in school, it's a whole process to check your child out for the day or an appointment or whatever. And I love the fact that I can just go knock on a door and say, hey, you have a minute? Even if my child's in their room or whatever, there's none of this like, oh, I've got to go through a process to access my child. They are already there, available. And because I know one day they won't be there, they'll be on their own. So while I have that opportunity, while they're in my home, I want to be that primary influence.
And it's the same for your kids. They don't have to go through channels to get to you in the middle of the day.
Yeah. Lisa, you froze there.
They're, if the day goes, all they have to do is say, hey, mom, and that is such a confidence and security, I think, to kids, that they know their mom is available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that solid foundation. We already lightly touched on it, to prepare them for life, but there's all different things, whether it be instilling a solid faith foundation. Obviously at Sonlight, that's a huge benefit. But then also things like life skills and preparing them for that time when they launch, or any other things, establishing your family culture or whatever you want. How does homeschooling with Sonlight really help make that easier too?
Well, I just loved the opportunity to encounter usually the hard things in a book, and then to tell them what I believed that God had for his plan in all of that. And so, yes, it's hard, and we're not promised easy, but we're promised the presence of Christ. through the hard. And so I really, really loved that. And I loved that we were not rushed. So my kids learned to do laundry and they learned to cook and they learned to change the oil in their car and how to change a flat tire, all of those things because we weren't rushed and had those kind of opportunities. So I feel like my kids are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I do feel like they are productive citizens in their respective worlds because they do have some of those experiences. And even waiting in line at the post office or interacting with the cashier at the grocery store. Because let's face it, if you didn't get off work till 5:30 and you stopped by daycare to pick the kids up and you had to go to the grocery, this is not the prime moment to get your child to buy a pack of gum with their own money from the cashier. But you can do that in the middle of the day. And that really, I think, helped my kids to be just outgoing and able to look someone in the eye and thank you for your help or have a nice day or whatever that turned out to be.
Yeah, I think the solid foundation too of looking at current events, looking at what's happening in the world, the chaos of the world, and then them seeing, okay, what do we do in light of that? We pray for people. We are aware of what's happening. We're not overcome. We trust God. We each day there are things in the world that happen, and there are things that we want to be concerned for others. We want to have empathy, which Sonlight builds huge empathy through learning about different people, not just the side that we're on or our pet subjects or projects or whatever, but thinking critically, the solid foundation of just that security in life through dependence on God and loving God and loving others, and just basic life skills. Like you said, my son came in this week and he was like, hey, I'm going to be late coming in from school, the one that's in college, because I have to get an oil change. And I was like, oh, and I asked my husband, did you remind him? He said, no, he just told me it was time for him to get an oil change and he's going and doing it. I think that they get to see the things that we're doing life. We're taking care of the things that need to be taken care of, maybe not perfectly because we scramble a little bit too, but they have seen us getting, doing those life skills, and that, kind of been able to see how we handle things. And that, I think that's great. I remember calling my mom sometimes in college or even after I first got married and asking her questions that she laughed at, like, well, why would you not know how to do this? And well, I don't know. I was at school when you did all of this. It's great when they and can see some of those, life events that adults do, adulting.
Exactly. It's funny that you say that because, I kind of taught myself to cook as a young adult because, meals were just kind of always made and I wasn't there to witness them or assist with them. But then my kids, because they've always been around, they already know how to cook way better than I did as a young adult because they've always been around. And I know I've referenced this in other videos too. My son is a grazer. So I taught him as soon as he could stand in front of the stove how to make a quesadilla or a grilled cheese or something easy because he eats about 10 times a day. And I did not want to be a slave to the stove. So I was like, you need to learn these things. Let me teach you how to cook. And so, both of the kids, I see it often where people are like, oh, how do we get the chores done? How do we get these things done? And I'm like, get those kids in there, let them help you, teach them how to do it. Because honestly, as my kids have gotten older, my life has gotten very easy that way because everybody in the house can pitch in, whether it be cleaning or picking something up, making a meal, whatever it might be. And so, I think those things, they're just very easy to teach when everybody's around all the time. Anytime one of my kids asks something, I'm like, well, what do you think? Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's go find an answer to that. And I think it's just become very natural because of Sonlight, and the discussion questions are so good. We've talked about it in other sessions where you hear other perspectives. It's not just, what do I think? What is my opinion on this issue? It's here's somebody who experienced this, or here's somebody else's perspective. But then even what I love, especially as the kids get older, it brings it back to, okay, well, what does God say about that? And we were talking about that in light of current events and what's going on in the world too, where, my daughter and I were saying, like, we know that if you're in this political party, you probably believe this. And if you're in this one, you believe this. But I was like, what does God actually say about that? She's like, oh, well, in the Bible here, it talks about blah, 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 And so we just recently were discussing how important it is to know your Bible, to know what God says. And I think these Sonlight kids have such a leg up because it's been part of their natural life as they've gone through their HBLs to read the Bible, to think about, okay, what does God say about this particular situation, whether it be historically or now. So like you guys said, when they launch and they're adults, they're already prepared to adult in a way that I think most young people are not. You talked about the manners, Lisa. I laugh because people all the time are like, well, how's your homeschool kid going to be socialized? And I'm like, if fast food employees are any indication, the public schools aren't teaching it either, because the teenagers that just stare at me when I walk into a restaurant, I mean, it blows my mind. Meanwhile, my kids who have been living life with me can walk in and say, hello, I would like this, please. I feel like I could send them off to work, if they were old enough, and they would already have better customer service skills in a lot of ways, just because they've always run errands with me. They know how to introduce themselves. They know how to say please and thank you and all of those things.
The number of books that we read, I hear parents, especially when you first start with Sonlight, like, why are we reading 18 books on, or why are we reading from all of these books at once? I think I'm just going to put them in order and read one at a time. And but the way we learn with Sonlight is through listening to a lot of different people. And there's a verse in the Bible about that says there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. I think there's wisdom in hearing from a lot of people that are from a lot of different backgrounds, and they tell a little bit of this story and a little bit of this story, and you get a different perspective than when you thought you were so smart because you only had your opinion.
Exactly. Yes. And when you're only looking at other sources to confirm that opinion, of course you think you know it all, right? So let's talk about the academics, though, because I think if literature-based learning, this whole, we're just going to read books together, that sounds like, is that enough? Obviously, Sonlight provides scholarships every year. We've seen it in test scores and various things, but how do you make sure that you're meeting the academic needs or goals of your student, that they are not going to graduate from your homeschool and then have very limited options because all you did was read together?
Well, I think that if you have that opinion, you're probably not a reader, because
Yes.
from the time I could carry a book around, I was traveling the world and, learning all the things. So you really can learn from a book. And I think that more importantly, you learn how to learn with Sonlight. And that is the thing. It doesn't matter if you can spout off 25 facts about whatever. If that's your limited knowledge and that's all you have for that, and you have no capability to take on more information, then you're just I don't know what you're just a trivia person, because you have no context. I guess that's really what it comes down to. And that's what the literature part of Sonlight really does. And it tells your kids why they should care about the 25 facts, because 25 facts are just facts. But when you put it in context and you learn how it affects people, because that's really what it matters is so why do I care? How does this affect me? How does this affect people I care about? How does this affect people I know? And when you can put it in that context and get the empathy, like Christy was talking about, and get the critical thinking and get the different perspectives, that's when you really become a smart person. Now people care about what you have to say, because you're not just spouting off things that I could learn from Alexa or Siri or whoever. They can tell me those facts, but it takes a person to make it care. Why do I need to know this? Well, because it affects people, and people are God's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think regardless of your goals, there are lots of examples of Sonlighters who had all sorts of goals and are in all, I mean, just from the Sonlighters that I've met through the years, they have children who have done all sorts of things and gone in lots of directions. And when our oldest graduated, I went to family weekend with him and went into his honors class, which had a professor that I had. The professor was new whenever I entered the university, and when I went back, it was really sweet to be able to sit in his classroom, and he looks completely different. He was so gray, and it made me feel old. But what I did feel like is that I was amongst a bunch of Sonlighters, is what I felt like. In the classroom, they were discussing books that they had read. They had listen to this, about 15 books they were reading that semester. And that was the honors class. They read these 15 books and they came to class and they discussed them. And that was the honors class. So,
So that's Sonlight.
So, yeah, I do think that there is a different level of learning. And like I said, back whenever I was in school, that's when I started loving to learn and digging in and starting. I read so many books my senior year, and I can remember being, just lit up about learning. I mean, literally, I would go back to my high school after, and I was reading all of these different books, and I would get excited in advanced math class about something that connected with something that I learned over here. And that, I think that it's almost like a switch got turned on that had been turned off by the classroom over the years, and in certain classrooms, not every classroom, but in certain classrooms. And I can remember that excitement about learning. And so, yes, you can meet your academic and exceed your academic goals. And there are plenty of examples, and we're thankful for scholarships and those type of things, as Sonlighters, that we have been able to take advantage of, not just from Sonlight, but from the school, that they recognize these homeschoolers and their academic accomplishments. So it definitely is. We're thankful for their Sonlight education and the way that it's prepared them. All of my boys are interested in different, they have different goals. And whether it's the biology major or the one who's interested in ancient languages, or the one that's, the ones that are very interested in music, and they're all different backgrounds, all different goals that they have. I do feel like we've prepared them well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think something too that I have found when I was in school, it was not cool to be into learning, or you didn't want to appear nerdy, or, I took all the honors classes in high school, so I was labeled the smart kid, right? But it wasn't like that was the label that I wanted to be necessarily. So I kind of downplayed it a lot. And when I was in school, but my kids, they are not ashamed or afraid to talk about what they think is cool that they're learning about, or to go explore something new. I know my son is working on getting a lot of the junior park ranger badges right now through the national park system, and he's always asking questions. And this is a kid who's naturally on the quiet side. I think if he went to school, he would definitely be shy and quiet, but asking questions, sharing what he's learning in the national parks, and he doesn't care if that's cool or not. He's excited and he's interested in it, right? And I've seen the same thing with my daughter. She's a teenage girl, right? Girls want to be focused on being cool and fitting in and all those things, but yet she will discuss really brainy topics, and it's because she finds them interesting. And so to me, seeing that difference in the way my kids just move through the world than the way I did in going to school, where you didn't want to highlight that, or then also you would learn things for a test and then dump them right out of your brain because I got my A, it doesn't matter now, as opposed to learning for learning's sake. And then, like you guys said, making those connections to other things further, later on in life. I think, that's such a huge benefit to learning in a comfortable environment, learning things you're interested in. And then, of course, I think if you've been around Sonlight for any time at all, you hear, I never would have picked this book up on my own, but Sonlight introduces you to so many new topics and new things that maybe you never would have looked at that book, and then it ends up being a favorite book or having a huge emotional impact or something like that. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, Christy, you mentioned they're really looking at those homeschooled students now because they see, oh, they are better prepared. And I love that your son's honors class, really, it's the Sonlight method. Read these books and discuss them. So that's amazing. I would have loved classes like that when I was in school. And to hear that, yeah, they are really, I don't know, almost seeking out those homeschooled students now, knowing that they are so well prepared, I think is very encouraging if you've got littles and you're wondering, can I do this, or am I putting them on the right track? Let's talk about, though, tailoring the curriculum to your children. We often hear, Sonlight is so rich and so full, and there's so many books. And if you have a lot of kids or you have littles and distractions and things like that, how do you tailor it to the children you have? Or maybe you have a child with some learning needs and it's harder to maintain whatever pace Sonlight says your students should be doing. So how do you tailor that to your child, save time, figure out what your students need, and better customize it to them?
I think that because there is so much available, it's, there was a time in our family that we were caring for my mom who was terminally ill and just trying to do all the things that I just said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to finish this in a school year. I'm going to allow myself up to 2 school years to finish this. And then when I finished in like 3 semesters, I was woo, because I wasn't behind. So I think if you have someone who this is overwhelming, you can always slow it down. Like having had my son who went all the way through public school, I know the amount of history he learned, which was not a lot. And so when I'm teaching my kindergartner about ancient cultures or my first grader American history, I'm doing, even if I only taught them through 1 book, I'm doing more than they would have had. So I feel like, hey, I'm winning, right? If we get to 3 books, that's even better. Sheila loves to tell that her child that went to high school after being homeschooled with Sonlight went to an honors class and they had to read 3 books. That was honors in high school. And she was just floored. But my son had the same experience. He was in all the honors classes and they didn't even read the books. They read an excerpt from a classic. That was what they did. So really, if you feel like you need to pare it down, if you need to slow it down, or if your child's on the other end and they're that child that's always asking, well, why? Or then what happened? It is very easy to jump on YouTube or Google or whatever and find out more, go to the library, get an extra book. It's just so easy to make it fit your family.
Yeah, I think in the early years, I really tailored to one of my guys who had a medical event that happened when he was a toddler and he had to regain language. And so we had lots of tailoring to fit. And I think that it's good to see, you can kind of see in their eyes when they're getting overwhelmed with the words, when I am, there's too much here, they need a break. And you can learn those cues in each other. And maybe it's me that I'm exhausted. I cannot read another word. I need a coffee break, you can tailor the curriculum to fit what you need. For my son, he was able to do math and language arts at grade level, but the read alouds needed to be with his younger brother, and the science, which was picture driven, could be with his older brother. And we actually used the science to help him learn to answer a given question. So he had been through speech therapy and had to regain language. And he had all of these, methods like they use with patients that have had strokes that helped him even access language again when he was only saying like 6 words and then 36 words. And so anyway, we tailored it and didn't overwhelm him. We met him where he was and we came along, and eventually he was doing the entire level at grade level. But not being discouraged where they are, be honest about where they are, and don't be overwhelmed by it. Just meet them where they are and just look for progress. Maybe write down where they are at the beginning of a semester, and then look at that again at the end of the semester. See where they've grown, and then, or maybe over the course of the year. And then sometimes it takes those little markers for you to see, okay, we've made progress. And the progress with a child that is not typically developing is going to have a different timeline. So maybe they're going to make more, their speed of progress is going to be faster, maybe, because they're covering so much more ground, but it's going to be at a different level. You're not going to be at the level of the fourth, the typically developing first grader in first grade, but maybe by the end of the year, they've made more than a year's worth of progress, and you start to see those gaps being filled in, and it can be encouraging to just take your eyes off of what you think should be standard, and then just look at that child and their progress. And over time, it's amazing to, from the beginning to the end of 13 years of schooling with our son. It's a pretty remarkable story, but in the middle, it's easy to get discouraged. So I would just say really customize and tailor it to your child, and love them where they are, teach them where they are, and watch for progress and be amazed. That's what I think.
Well, and I love that progress is, I think, the number one key, right? I think if you're coming out of school, it can be hard to say like, oh, well, this is what has to be accomplished in 1 year or 2 years or whatever. But that's not always real life. Kids learn at different levels, or like Lisa, when you were taking care of family, you didn't have the same amount of time to put into that. So yeah, I think absolutely. I always look at, is this really hard right now? Is this easy? Like how does it feel, right? If it feels too easy, well, let's pick it up a little bit. Clearly we're going a little too slow. But if it's feeling really hard, why is it feeling really hard? Is it a time thing? Is it that the child can't read on the level I'm trying to force them to read on with all these books? And something that for me, it was just a little mental trick that made it easier. I quit writing the dates at the top of my IG. That was something that I always did, like on Monday, okay, this week we're going to accomplish this. And when I quit writing a date there and just started checking it off, we might still accomplish that in 1 week. But it wasn't that pressure of, oh, shoot, I got behind and we only made it through Wednesday and now we're on another week and I'm seeing last week's dates looking at me. So, little tricks like that, or if you see an assignment there and you just can't let it go, cross it out, because now you've made the conscious effort that you are not going to read that book. You are not going to do that language arts assignment. You are not going to answer those science questions, whatever it may be. You're making that decision. It's not the same as it looking at you. So some of those little mental tricks, if you're very type A, can be super helpful. But yeah, look, pay attention to your kids and see if it's really, really hard for them, or if it's really, really hard for you. You need to make some changes. And, really the reading, writing, and arithmetic, those are the 3 main skills they're going to need. But as they get older, hand them the book if they're able to read it, and say, we'll talk about that when you're done. Turn on the audiobook, whatever it might be, to make it a little bit easier for you. Ladies, we are running low on time. So if you can throw out one last maybe time-saving tip or trick or encouragement that has helped you stick with the homeschooling journey over the years, I would love to hear that. But let's make it short and snappy because we're running out of time.
Well, I am fully a reluctant homeschool mom. I did not plan this for our life. I'm thankful that God had a better plan, but just seeing my children thrive, don't fix what's not broken. And my kids were loving our family, and our family was loving what was happening. And so it worked. But don't fix what's not broken. If it's working, keep going, because that's your sign that you're doing well, and no one loves your kids like you do. So no one else has the same motivation to have them wants them to be their best like you do. And so if everybody's happy and most days are thumbs up, then keep on keeping on. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it saves time if you're not trying to accomplish goals that aren't for your family. If there's anything, like trying to recreate school at home or any of the things that we've talked about. Focus in on what's going to be helpful and then leave behind those pressury things that are not going to be helpful, I would say.
That's so true. Yeah. And I know for me, Lisa, you mentioned it. Some people don't want to homeschool necessarily. Some do, some fall into it. There's all different types of homeschoolers. I was definitely one that never planned to homeschool, but when I saw what was already happening in my kids and the fruits of that very small part of labor, because I started in preschool, when it was just reading a few stories, but I started to see my older child grow and develop and started seeing those fruits. I knew I had to keep going. And so as time went on and it got harder, I learned to prioritize and shift my life in a way that I could keep homeschooling her and then now my second child, because I was seeing those benefits. So if you are struggling and you feel like it's really hard, you're just starting out, or maybe you have a lot of littles, I will assure you it does get easier as they get older. And I would not trade the time that I have spent with those kids for anything in the world. It is just, I don't know that I could even put into words how impactful our Sonlight journey has been and homeschooling those kids, spending that time with them. So I would encourage you to keep going. If you need support or prayer, though, please reach out to us in the Sonlight Connections app. We're all there. We would love to pray for you and then give you maybe some practical advice based on what's going on in your home, because we've probably all experienced it at one point or another. So make sure you're reaching out to us in the Sonlight Connections app. Also, tune in every month for future Homeschool Helps and Hacks sessions. We do them the third Thursday of every month. So make sure you're tuning in for that. Also, as we move into fall/winter, you'll start seeing all of Sonlight's Christmas promotions coming. So just keep an eye on the website and on our social media pages and in the app and all the places so that you don't miss out on any exciting Christmas announcements or any sales that might be going on. As always, Christy and Lisa, thank you for bringing your wisdom to us today. And if we did not get to a question you had, please send those to us after in the comments. We would love to answer them for you.